All right, since I've talked about the mechanisms and stuff, I really want to talk about just what this feels like subjectively. Obviously, I've done this because I'm talking to you guys so much about it and I've researched it. So, best way I could describe this is the come up on a typical trip. You end up feeling uh, typically anxious, like knowing that like a good friend is going to show up and you're kind of excited about it, but you don't know how it's going to go. Um, some people could take that as feeling like you might have to do some public speaking. So there's an anxiousness that happens when it comes up. From there, you end up kind of randomly having a point where you just like feel like you just woke up randomly, like it's the very first moments and you're very, very, very present and everything visually is razor sharp. And bizarrely, you feel more sober, is the best way I could describe it. Particularly on LSD, you feel very, very sober. Um, LSD and mushrooms are a little different. Mushrooms sit typically in a more emotional space, while LSD sits in a more logical space. Um, Both are incredibly valuable, I would say. Uh, Coming down from ego death, you just begin to remember like who you are, what's going on, and you tend to not care as much in that headspace while you're still high about if you're like right and wrong. So I've noticed like, okay, first on like the very come up, uh, one of my friends, he realized that, you know, he said it, he described it feeling like he stepped into an HD video game and he had see grass all over the place and it felt like there was an achievement unlocked when he looked at the grass, but then he checked his like chart and it was like I already unlocked that achievement. So it was like everything felt new, but he already knew it all. Okay. But the other part about like not feeling personal about being right and wrong, two of my friends, they would always bicker at each other and correct each other and it was really kind of toxic. But they were all tripping together once and one of them corrected the other, and I remember my friend was like, oh dude, thanks, like, and then he paused for a second. He's like, really, I'm just happy that you helped me find the truth and I'm less concerned about you being right or wrong, and it's pretty nice. And they're like, yeah, and they had a good talk about it. It was really interesting. So there's a sense of loss of your own personal care of your own ego, even when you're aware of it. um I mean, that's kind of the majority of it. As far as visuals, there's a lot less visual action that goes on in this than most people think. It's just the easiest way to actually depict it in a movie. There are visual effects, yes, and if you take a lot, there's quite a bit, but I don't think that's as much actually where the magic is at and what's actually useful. It's neat though, don't get me wrong, but it's I don't think it's the main aspect of it. So that's like the main like feeling of it. After the fact, you typically don't want to do it again because a lot of the time you end up feeling things this very intensely. You're okay while you're in the state. You feel hypersensitive, like you borderline feel like yeah, okay. So you know, like when you're socializing, you can let a few things go and just be like, yeah, whatever, and it's a little awkward. You keep not when you're tripping. It's like you see everything and you take it in full bore and it impacts you emotionally hard every single time. And so other people are hard to be around because it low key, you feel so sensitive to everything that you feel like you can read their mind because you're just picking up so much information off of them. And it can be overwhelming and it can be a lot. So it's a very intense feeling being that sensitive to your environment. It's one reason going outside is such a key thing to do. It's because you get surrounded by nature. There's a lot of good positive inputs that our bodies really like. You're getting sunlight, which powers your cells and all of that jazz. So it's there's something good there. So what's another thing? Yeah, after you come back to yourself, you the first time you do it, you realize you can actually think differently and you have fundamentally different thoughts that you're capable of holding in your brain that you used to not be able to, which is wild. Um, from there, it's really about like assessing your life and being like, okay, what do I want to do with my life? Because I feel like I just rebooted my life system. I just re-stepped into being myself, and you're like a brand new human being again. So you're like, am I going to make any adjustments? Is this where I want to be? And you can tweak stuff in that headspace after the fact, which is wild. And so you have to really understand you're in a state where you're taking in a lot of information, you're hypersensitive, you have a very profound experience that imprints itself really hard into your system. So this is kind of where I'm like, I'm not for people taking this and just going for a rave for the first time. And a lot of people do this with a lot of their friends, but when you are that sensitive, you can sometimes realize like your friends aren't amazing people even. You can feel alienated by them or just scared of them because all of a sudden you're reassessing who they are, because it's like you've met them for the first time too. And you can also just be fine with your friends, but then be realizing what your family life is really like as you're kind of coming back into yourself, and be like, oh my God, and like trying not to process that in front of your friends because you're trying to hold face. That's not a good scenario either. And so being hypersensitive means that we process our emotions really clearly because they're so clear you can't ignore them. It's so dramatic, you have to face it. You can't go. It's like hiding from a tsunami. It's like, well, okay, there, yeah, we're gonna try not to get wet. Yeah, you can avoid the beach, but you can't avoid a tsunami. So this is what it's like for your emotions, and being around people like that is not fun, and I don't recommend doing that for your first time. And that's not the point of these substances. They can give you a lot if you know what you're doing with them, and there's so many people who just do not use these correctly and do not gain much from them. Now, I'm not saying like I do the perfect thing, you can't have fun with these. Yes, you can go have fun with them, but you best learn what they are first, and you need to understand that there needs to be respect given to these things because they're very potent. In the same way that you give respect to a sharp knife, you don't want to you don't want a dull knife. You want a sharp knife, but the moment that thing is razor sharp, you have to respect it or it's going to mess you up. And that's what you're dealing with here. Okay? So that's what it's like. Geez, got a little passionate there. The last thing I want to say, because this one's kind of just an all-encompassing thing with this topic, and I guess we're going to be well-rounded about covering this. You need to reflect. You need to think back on what happened, and you need to really ponder bringing things back in. The trip's not over when you're done tripping. The trip is never really over, but you after coming down from the high, there is a responsibility after the fact where you need to take the information and actually incorporate it into your life. That looks different depending on what happens. I can't make those decisions for you, but you got this. You got it. So thinking through your issues and thinking back on what works and what doesn't work in your life and actually changing things is a really crucial part of the tripping process, even though it happens when you're sober, because it kind of feels like you've been given a bunch of tools and you need to grab at the ones that actually can help you. So yeah, you have the come up, which is uncomfortable. It's the worst part. And then you have ego death, which is wild and can be frightening and beautiful all in the same time. You have the emotional outcome of it all, where you are actually really hardcore, like putting yourself back together and feeling everything, like what's important to you and what's not. And then you have after the fact, when you're finally sober, where you get to really choose like what you do next and think about what was learned, what was valuable, and what wasn't. So that's kind of tripping in a nutshell of what it's like. You can see how being in a controlled environment like the therapists are providing, that it brings a higher likelihood to have a positive experience and actually gain something out of it. But yeah, it's a lot. It's very intense. And due to that, I think we should be very educated about what this thing is, because people are doing this, kids are doing this, and they need to know what they're doing if they're going to be doing this, because if you're going to do it either way and it's something you can get something beneficial out of, get something beneficial out of it. Don't just hurt yourself and give yourself some trauma for no reason. So the next videos, I'm going to cover more of how to avoid all of that. And if you're still interested after this, because you can see I'm not just saying this is sunshine and rainbows, because it's not. This is a valuable tool that can actually really help you with your mental well-being, but it's like pulling a splinter out of your hand. It's relieving, but it's not necessarily fun. You can have fun with these things too. I'm not saying that. And you use, I would say, different dosages for that, or you do a lot of inner work so you know that you're comfortable and can be in a good place when you're in that state of mind because you've done the work. But if it's your first time, odds are you have blind spots. I still have blind spots, and I recycle. Yeah, I mean, like, I go on a cycle and take one of these things, or go on a trip is what I really mean to say, on a cyclical manner. Goodness, that was hard to say. Annually, typically, at some point, I find time and space to go deep inward. Man, I'm really not talking well right now. Deep inward, and actually discover things that I might be missing. And sometimes not much comes up. Sometimes it's like, oh man, like, well, okay, that's something that missed me. Now I know. It's important. It's part of emotional hygiene. So, hope you enjoyed that. I'm going to get more details on this coming up next.